Hello, my name is Mikhail Baranov, and now let's go into more detail. Volodymyr Zelensky addressed all Ukrainians regarding the US peace plan. The president emphasized that Ukraine will continue a constructive dialogue with the United States and other partners, will propose alternative solutions, but will not allow the enemy to claim that Ukraine is not striving for peace.
Right now is one of the most important moments in our history. Right now is one of the most difficult moments in our history. At this moment, the pressure on Ukraine is among the heaviest we've ever faced. Now Ukraine may find itself facing a very difficult choice. Either the loss of dignity or the risk of losing a key partner. Either the complicated 28 points or an extremely harsh winter, the hardest yet, and further risks. A life without freedom, without dignity, without justice, and that we should trust someone who has already attacked us twice, around the clock, 24/7. I will fight to ensure that, among all the points of the plan, at least two are not overlooked. These are the dignity and freedom of Ukrainians, because everything else is built on this foundation. Our sovereignty, our independence, our land, our people, the Ukrainian future. We will and must do everything so that the result is the end of the war, and not the end of Ukraine, the end of Europe, or the end of global peace.
The details of the American proposals regarding a possible format for ending the war, as well as further steps to achieve a lasting peace, were discussed over the phone by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and US Vice President J.D. Vance. The Ukrainian leader emphasized that Kyiv is considering the White House's proposal and is working to ensure that any further course of action is acceptable and effective for both sides. Prior to this, the draft peace plan was discussed by the leaders of Ukraine, France, the United Kingdom, and Germany. Volodymyr Zelensky had phone conversations with Emmanuel Macron, Keir Starmer, and Friedrich Merz. The Ukrainian president thanked the countries for their principled support of Kyiv and noted that any plan must ensure a just peace. And Keir Starmer once again emphasized that above all, the interests of Ukraine must be taken into account. I spoke with President Zelensky. With President Macron and Chancellor Merz, it was an opportunity for us to once again emphasize that our support for Ukraine remains unwavering, as does the very important principle that all issues concerning Ukraine must ultimately be resolved by Ukraine itself. We all want a just and lasting peace. This is what the President of the United States wants, and it is what we all want. Therefore, we need to move toward this goal, but the principle that Ukraine must determine its own future based on its sovereignty is fundamental. Encouraging aggression by the Russian Federation will not make Ukraine or the European Union any safer. This was stated at a press conference in Brussels by the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Kaja Kallas. This is how the head of European diplomacy commented on the American draft peace plan.
Russia has no legitimate right to any concessions from the country it has invaded. Ultimately, the terms of any agreement must be determined by Ukraine. The EU has a simple two-point plan to support Ukraine and to put pressure on Russia. The EU is providing Ukraine with a record level of military support to help it defend itself, and we will continue to do so.
Ukraine, together with its European partners, continues to work on its own peace plan project. According to Sky News, the document may also be discussed with Donald Trump. More on the details of this plan, its key points, and Kyiv's main concerns in the following report.
There are certain proposals regarding ending Russian aggression against Ukraine, and we are ready to discuss them. This statement was made by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. According to Axios, the draft peace plan consists of 28 points. Among the key points are freezing the front lines in the Kherson and Zaporizhzhia regions, reducing the size of the Ukrainian army, withdrawing the armed forces of Ukraine from the Donetsk region, creating a fund for Ukraine's reconstruction using frozen Russian assets, and providing security guarantees for Kyiv based on NATO's Article 5 principle, which would allow the United States to use force in the event of a new Russian attack. According to Axios, citing a senior American official, the Trump administration refers to this document as a living one. They are ready to modify it depending on the course of future
negotiations. We are not making any loud statements. We will calmly work with America and all our partners. There will be a constructive search for solutions with our main partner. I will present arguments, I will persuade, and I will offer alternatives. But we will definitely not give the enemy any reason to say that this Ukraine does not want peace, that it is Ukraine that is disrupting the process, and that this Ukraine is not ready for diplomacy. That will not happen.
Kyiv has already indicated that it does not agree with some of the published points of the proposed peace plan. At the UN Security Council meeting, the Ukrainian delegation reminded everyone of its clear red lines: preservation of state sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the inadmissibility of any restrictions on the right to self-defense.
We will never recognize, either unofficially or in any other way, the territory of Ukraine temporarily occupied by the Russian Federation as Russian. Our land is not for sale. Ukraine will not agree to any restrictions on its right to self-defense or on the size and capabilities of our armed forces. We will also not tolerate any encroachments on our sovereignty, including our sovereign right to choose the alliances we seek to join.
In addition to disagreeing with certain points of a possible peace plan, Kyiv also doubts the Russian Federation's willingness to fulfill any agreements. The Ukrainian side reminds us, the Kremlin has repeatedly shown that it avoids direct dialogue about ending hostilities. This was already evident during the negotiations in Turkey, when Volodymyr Zelenskyy proposed to Putin to meet in Istanbul on May 15th. He ignored the invitation and sent a low-level delegation to Turkey while the Ukrainian president was present there in person.
We are confident in ourselves. We support President Trump's leadership.
The office of the President of Ukraine believes that the White House, by promoting the peace plan project, is primarily trying to force Russia to come to the negotiating table. Donald Trump has repeatedly emphasized that this aggression should never have started in the first place. And despite the fact that Moscow still does not show any desire to end the war, largely because the tools of pressure on the Kremlin have not yet been fully employed.
The American side insists that it is still necessary to create a realistic framework for negotiations. It is offering its own proposals. And naturally, Ukraine is showing its willingness to discuss these realistic negotiations with the United States. These positions that can be advanced within the framework of the negotiation process and so on. And
while the draft peace plan is still under development, European leaders have also begun preparing their own alternative to it, according to the Wall Street Journal. According to the publication, they are putting together their own package of proposals, which they believe will be significantly fairer to Kyiv than the previously published document. They plan to finish work on the text in the coming days.
One person was killed as a result of a Russian strike on the Chernihiv region. During the day, Russia attacked the region with drones. In the Chernihiv district, a fire broke out on the grounds of a private residence and a residential house was damaged. In the Novhorod-Siversky district, a grocery store caught fire. Rescuers freed a woman from under the rubble, but they were unable to save her. The aftermath of the attack has already been dealt with. Russian troops tried to break through the Ukrainian defenses 130 times. This was counted along the entire front line by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. The enemy is conducting assaults in 12 directions. What is the situation on one of the most difficult sections of the front, the Pokrovsk sector? And why is the gray zone expanding in the area of hostilities? We'll tell you in our next report.
Ukrainian intelligence operatives destroyed a helicopter and expensive Russian air defense systems. Footage of the explosive operation in occupied Crimea was published by the main Intelligence Directorate of Ukraine. The special unit Primary inflicted another serious loss on the Russian army. Their spoils included the Terek, Nebo-U and Nebo-SV radar stations in a dome structure, as well as the Lira Airfield radar complex. And in southern Ukraine, a coastal defense brigade struck a Russian logistics base. According to the military, the Barracuda drone boat successfully carried out a combat mission on the left bank in the Dnipro wetlands and destroyed a gathering place of Russian army boats. Intense fighting continues in the Pokrovsk direction. According to Ukrainian military sources, the Russian army has intensified infantry assaults near Pokrovsk and increased drone attacks on the logistics routes of the Ukrainian armed forces. Ukrainian paratroopers note that the enemy is trying to cross the railway in order to expand the area of occupation in the city, but these attempts are being blocked. In the 7th Air Assault Corps of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, they say that the occupiers' forces in Pokrovsk are being worn down, and Russian generals are already bringing in reserves from units of the 76th Air Assault Division of the Russian Federation to make up for their losses.
One of the key objectives remains the complete cutoff of the enemy's logistical routes into the city, including through the use of tactical and army aviation. In the northern outskirts of Mirnohrad, the clearing of Russian infantry is nearing completion. We are also bringing in additional resources to detect and eliminate the enemy, whose movement has been recorded in the southern part of the city. Small enemy groups attempted to infiltrate Rishin, northwest of Pokrovsk, but Ukrainian forces detected and eliminated the enemy in time. From a statement by the 7th Air Assault Corps of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. On Telegram.
The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine recorded 130 battles along the entire front line. Since the beginning of the day, on the Alexandrovsk direction, the defense forces have stopped 20 Russian assaults. On the Kostiantynivka section of the front, Ukrainian defenders repelled 16 attacks. And on the Sloviansk bridgehead, the Russians tried 11 times to break through Ukrainian defenses in the areas of 6 settlements. The Russians continue to use their tactic of infiltrating with small groups in the Kharkiv region. This was reported on the United News Marathon broadcast by Viktor Trehubov, head of communications for the Joint Forces Group. According to him, the four most difficult directions remain the southern Slobozhanske, Velika Bulutska, Kupiansk, and Lyman directions. He also said that in fact there is no longer a clear front line along most of the front. Instead, a zone 10 to 20 kilometers wide has formed, where Ukrainian and Russian drones are constantly operating. In fact,
those 20 kilometers are a gray zone. It's impossible to draw a line there. It has expanded because drones have started to operate more actively. And considering that drones will operate both via fiber optics and with increased range, there are forecasts that the gray zone will expand to 40 to 50 kilometers.
Since the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Russian army losses have already exceeded 1,163,000 military personnel. Just in the past 24 hours, the defense forces eliminated 1,050 occupiers. These figures were announced by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. The list of Russian military losses was also supplemented by 3 armored vehicles, 24 artillery systems, 150 drones, and 65 units of automotive equipment.
Russia's hybrid war has crossed a critical line, stated the Prime Minister of Poland. Donald Tusk noted that the sabotage organized by the Kremlin aims to destabilize and weaken Poland and bears the hallmarks of state terrorism. The Prime Minister emphasized that recent events leave no room for illusions.
Russia wants to weaken us from every angle. Russia wants to weaken us at any cost because today Poland is too strong to be attacked directly. Moscow's strategy is clear. It believes that we should be in conflict with Europe, with Ukraine, and most importantly in conflict within our own country. We cannot allow this scenario or any part of it to come to pass. It depends on us, on all of us.
Poland has launched a large-scale operation to protect the railway after the tracks were sabotaged by Russian special services. Up to 10,000 soldiers have been deployed to guard critical infrastructure, and drones, helicopters, and special equipment will help prevent Russian threats. Details in the report by Victoria Chistyukina.
At midnight on November 21st, Operation Horizon was launched in Poland, involving up to 10,000 military personnel and law enforcement officers, to strengthen the protection of critical infrastructure facilities. This was announced by the country's Minister of Defense Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz. Operation Horizon involves the mobilization of various army units, territorial defense forces, special operations units, police, the Railway Protection Service, and other agencies.
Special attention is being paid to police operations, ensuring security and protecting critical infrastructure. Joint patrolling and collaborative efforts among all relevant state services to effectively counter sabotage attacks, and to further enhance the safety and security of Polish citizens, as well as to promote social integration in the ongoing fight against disinformation. Police officers, military personnel, railway security services, and all state institutions will cooperate on this matter. They will work together, they will jointly create organizational groups, so to speak, in the best sense of the word, to ensure security.
As noted by the military, this is the largest deployment of military personnel within Poland in recent times. The operation will employ artificial intelligence, which will allow for more accurate and faster detection of sabotage threats. Troops have been dispersed throughout the entire territory of Poland.
The situation demands such dedication. In the capitals of European countries, it is common to see soldiers on the streets. You can observe these non-military actions of the army. Poland is ready for this. We have the third largest army in NATO. Soldiers from the territorial defense forces, together with the railway guard, patrol railway lines and areas that are most vulnerable and in need of protection. The Polish army is capable of neutralizing the advantage that night cover or inaccessible terrain gives to potential saboteurs and organizers of sabotage.
The operation was a response to a recent act of sabotage on the railway between Lublin and Warsaw. Russian intelligence services are suspected of organizing it. After that, Poland decided to close the last functioning Russian consulate in Gdansk.
A section of track on the Warsaw-Dorohusk line was blown up and power lines were damaged near the Golom station, which caused a sudden stop of a train carrying almost 500 passengers. In connection with these events, a decision was made to carry out a large-scale operation involving the military. According to a publication by RMF24,
according to Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, the Russian Federation is interested in stirring up chaos, panic, and speculation given the number of Ukrainians who have fled the war to Poland. He is convinced that this is part of a planned campaign to undermine cooperation between Kyiv and Warsaw, and this must not be allowed to happen.
this is especially dangerous in countries like Poland since there are more than 1 million Ukrainian refugees in our country alone. That is why Russia believes it will be easier to incite anti-Ukrainian sentiment here.
Tusk noted that the railway route between Warsaw and Lublin is crucial for delivering aid to Ukraine. Its sabotage is an unprecedented act of subversion. According to the Prime Minister, the explosion destroyed the track. Poland has asked the United States for assistance in investigating these incidents. The act of sabotage on the railway in Poland is just another sign that NATO must respond to Moscow's tactics, said Lithuania's foreign minister.
This is a very dangerous phase of escalation, and we must take it with the utmost seriousness as we are only minutes away from major casualties. If these operations, this sabotage carried out in Poland, had succeeded, we would be negotiating in a completely different situation with loss of life. Kęstutis Budrys, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Lithuania, in an interview with Politico,
Ukraine and Poland will create a joint group to prevent Russian sabotage. According to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, Ukazaliznytsia has already implemented appropriate measures to counter possible sabotage. Ukraine is ready to cooperate with Poland at various levels and share all information. Victoria Chistyukina for Freedom TV channel.
Russia is preparing to test NATO's collective defense, said Mikael Claesson, Commander-in-Chief of the Swedish Armed Forces. According to him, Moscow could provoke incidents in the Baltic countries or any other part of continental Europe at any moment. And these intentions will not disappear even after the war in Ukraine ends. They are ready to take enormous strategic risks to get everything they believe is possible. We saw this in Chechnya, we saw it in Georgia, we saw it in Crimea. The West as a collective is in a systemic conflict with Russia, and resolving it will take a long time. We're essentially talking about an entire generation, and it won't disappear with a possible ceasefire or the signing of a peace agreement in Ukraine. Mikael Biden, Commander-in-Chief of the Swedish Armed Forces, in an interview with Politico,